Why? Like, seriously, who thought that was a good idea? Welcome back, everyone, to this, the second iteration of me, Almost a Doctor, reacting to James Bond. Today, we're going to be looking at cars, and along with some explosions, bullets, missiles, and even lasers, what's not to love? So, let's get going. Alright, so the first of 5 cars we're going to look at today is the BMW 750iL from Tomorrow Never Dies. Now there's a couple of reasons why I wanted to look at this car first, and we'll get to those in a moment. So, let's start with the gadgets. Taking a look at this scene, one of the first things you notice, and they also explain it early in the movie, is that the car is remote controlled. That in itself is actually pretty simple, and particularly if you had the resources of a British Secret Service agency with the genius of Q, then that's fairly easy to do. However, anyone who's ever had a radio on when you've driven into a multi-storey concrete car park or an underground car park will know that that radio cuts out very quickly. What I would like to draw your attention to here is the bulletproof glass. Now, as you can see here, that there are bullets being embedded, there are cracks in the glass, and it takes quite a bit of firepower to get through. Now, the cracks in the glass is actually fairly accurate. If you have bulletproof glass, that doesn't mean that it's not going to show the impacts of bullets. It's just the idea is that the bullets don't make it all the way through. Often you have multiple panes of glass with polymers embedded in between, so you'll crack the first layer and then the bullet will be stopped. So that's actually fairly accurate. What isn't is the fact that the rest of the car, the bonnet, the sides, the metal around it, is not dented at all. The other thing to note is that bulletproof glass generally has to be really thick, from about 2 centimeters to 10 centimeters depending what you're firing at it. The first thing I note with this part is that the rocket hits underneath the front of the car, yet somehow flips the back of the car up. That's actually not how momentum works, and if you pause it at the right moment, you can actually see the cables they use to pull the car. Okay, so this bit here, you can see the tyres get popped, but then James Bond is able to re-inflate them. And I'm not exactly sure how that works, because pumping air directly into the tyres isn't going to help because the holes are still there. Maybe you'd need a foam or maybe a second inflatable tyre in it. However, if there was foam, you'd expect some of it to come out the holes before it dried and solidified in the tyre. So yeah, I'm not actually sure how that bit would work. You'd be better off just having a completely metal inside to the tyre with a rubber outside, in which case they'd never burst in the first place. And so here is where I want to get to the point about the remote control through the concrete roof. Now, I think it's only one floor, so we might be okay, but there's still a fairly substantial amount of material between where James Bond's radio control is and the actual car, which has to receive and, of course, send the video signal. Now, as ridiculous as this bit is, the car smashes through a brick/concrete barrier, falls several floors and smashes through the window of a shop. I mean, that's quite irresponsible because, well, there's probably people there, and I thought James Bond was meant to protect everyone. But also the fact that the car somehow isn't dented. The car, apart from the windshield, seems to be in one piece. Now, bulletproofing, like this car clearly has to have had, is heavy. If you want a car that is not going to get completely destroyed by the amount of bullets and missiles that has been fired at it like this, it's going to weigh several extra tons. And even still, you're going to see dents. You're going to see impacts. You're going to see scorch marks, everything, yet you see none of that. Alright, for the second car we're going to look at today, we're going to the Living Daylights and the Aston Martin V8. Now here, this is one of the 2 Timothy Dalton James Bond movies, some of my favourite James Bond movies. And we're going to look at a particular scene where he is trying to run away from some communists. However, they've picked up on a police scanner that they're after them. Now, putting a police scanner in a car is fairly easy. You can even buy commercial police scanners to listen into them. That's actually the easiest part of this scene to believe. The next bit, however, not so much. So what you're about to see, James Bond, Timothy Dalton, has a laser fitted to the wheel of the car. Now, lasers are my expertise, and I can tell you that this is not how they work. If you have a look at an actual laser cutter, they tend to be very, very close to their target. They're right up against it, and that's because they're focusing the laser beam. They've got it focused in quite sharply so that all that energy is going to one point to make it easier to cut. They also tend to cut sheets, and while some of them can cut through fairly thick sheets of metal, there's no way you're going to cut through a car like that. The best you'd hope for with a laser fitted in a wheel like that is to burst the enemy's tyre. Heating up and bursting the rubber will be the easiest thing to do, and that's what I would look for if I was going to put in lasers to stop my enemy. However, despite how much I do love lasers, I wouldn't use them as a weapon. Lasers just don't make very good weapons. The other thing too is, for a laser that powerful, where are you getting the energy from? I mean, the car battery isn't going to supply that. So not only are lasers, particularly in those days, huge, but they also require an immense amount of energy. So a lot of fire in that explosion. Explosions don't generally make that much flame. A lot of smoke, yes, but they tend to be more of a sudden bang. See my other video for why that is. And here, this is what I was talking about. A lot of movies seem to show bullets hitting bulletproof material and making no dents, no cracks. Now, whilst the previous car was a little better for that, this one here, yes, for some reason the glass is impervious to even showing scratches from bullets. Yeah, I've forgotten how ridiculous some of the earlier James Bonds can be. Although I guess the wood would protect them from some shrapnel, and I am pretty sure one of those Russians there has a World War II German machine gun for some reason. Oh well. Okay, why do they always speed up halfway through a chase? Never got that. There is no way this would occur. You can see only a few centimeters of the actual metal sticking out from the rest of the wheel frame, yet somehow it cuts through about 20 centimeters to a foot of ice. There is no way that's going to happen. Particularly if you've got all the bulletproofing in the car that you have, it's going to weigh a lot more than you expect. It is not going to make that jump, and even if it does, I wouldn't trust my chances on landing. I think the Mythbusters showed that rockets and cars don't go very well together. For this one, we're going to go back a bit in time to the original James Bond, Sean Connery, and we're going to look at a chase scene from Goldfinger. So here we have the Aston Martin DB5, one of the most iconic James Bond cars. I'm going to see how the old ones compare. One thing I have noticed is they don't quite have as many gadgets, but they do have a few very iconic ones. Alright, so, spoiler alert, James Bond here has been captured, and he's got a gun pointed to his head, and they're trying to drive him into Goldfinger's processing facility. If you've also seen my laser video, that's also where they fire a laser at James Bond's crotch. I don't know why the other guy isn't doing anything. Okay, I just want to make a note here on ejector seats in cars. If you're trying to get the other person out, they're not a bad idea, but if it's for you and for safety, no way. You need at least 100 feet or 30 meters for a parachute to deploy. If you launch a person that high, when they come back down, they're going to hurt themselves. So you need an incredible force to fling someone out of the car. So that force could probably do you a bit of damage. If you look at jet fighters and their ejector seats, they actually use explosives to clear the cockpit glass or the windshield off, and then they launch the chair up with rockets. If you're still in the car when that happens, yeah, you're probably not going to be looking too good, even if you do get to a hospital. Alright, so this is fairly normal though, this scene. Apart from that, there's the car zooming around. It doesn't appear to be all that bulletproof. They're using pistols, so probably wouldn't destroy the car too quickly. Although there are a couple of machine guns, I think. And unlike the others where it's all about rockets and machine guns, This is very interesting how it gets stopped. And there we go. There's Oddjob. It's a nice photo shoot. He's very happy with himself. I think this is the only time James Bond is actually defeated by a mirror. Now on to Die Another Day. Plot of this James Bond is very, very similar to one of the originals, Diamonds Are Forever. The only thing is, the satellite in Diamonds Are Forever uses diamonds, no surprise there, to focus a massive laser beam that can destroy things like missiles. This one uses a foldable mirror, so I guess it's at least partially more realistic because of that. But anyway, we're not here for satellites, we're here for the car. So let's have a look at this. We'll start with the briefing before we get into the action. So, the idea of camouflage like this, adaptive camouflage, is not too far out there. There are people who are working on things like this. So you can look at research where they'll look at negative refractive index, which will literally bend the light around the object so it doesn't even appear like it's there. But the idea of having lots and lots of little cameras and displaying the image on the other side, no way. I mean, the cameras themselves, are you covering them with something? And if you cover the cameras, what are they seeing? The idea of a polymer, like they mentioned, maybe this is an LCD screen. Alright, so now let's move on to the actual action scene, or one of the main action scenes with this car, where we can actually put these gadgets to use. Now, the first thing I would note with the invisibility cloak is that it probably wouldn't work perfectly, or at least not as well as this, and I think some of the guards would probably notice the tracks going across. But making an invisibility cloak that would cover everything, like tires, where you're literally running over the display and the cameras, just wouldn't work. I can just imagine how he would have filmed this. I think the first time you had a dent or a crack or a single bullet hit this car, you'd lose a fairly large portion of the imaging. I think I heard something crack or shatter, but the car seems to be in one piece. That is something I've noticed about Bond cars. They always seem to stay in one piece, except the windscreens. Okay, I think I'd prefer to have that car with a nice minigun. A couple of thousand rounds a minute. Okay, so they do get rid of the screen after a few bullets, but I think it would have been as soon as the first bullets hit. And again, with the bulletproofness. Bulletproof doesn't mean that you won't see dents or anything from impacts. You'll still see cracks in the window, you'll still see dents and even holes in the car if you pump enough bullets into it. I mean, the first tanks you could actually get through with a heavy machine gun. So this car, unless it had incredibly thick armor, you're going to show at least some of those bullets. Now, the amount of ammunition you'd need, though, to keep a minigun like that operating would weigh the car down a lot. Plus, with the missiles and everything, I actually don't know where you're going to fit it. They're doing very well for skidding around on ice, though. Maybe they need the spikes from the Living Daylights. I'm also not sure how the system would repair itself if the cameras or the display is broken. I don't think the car could reproduce more LCD TV displays. And here we go with these ejector seats. Also, let's just replay that again. I am pretty sure the rocket would have missed. Okay, no, the first one hits it, obviously, but the second rocket, I'm pretty sure, would have missed whether the car was flipped over or not. It seems to go under the wheels to our right of the car. Really, the Bond villains need to work on their targeting systems. Oh, here we go. Reminds me of the hedgehog devices they used in World War II for anti-submarine warfare. You just line a giant array of bombs up and launch them all in one go. Oh, and here's the satellite I was mentioning earlier. I mean, it somehow carved off an ice sheet earlier, so I'm not sure why it's taking so long to melt through the single building that's, what, few stories tall? Yeah, I don't think movies tend to like timing. If it's the same amount of energy going through, it doesn't matter with building with hollow, it'll melt through it pretty quickly. Unless they're being slow just to give James Bond a chance. Here we go with the bullets again. What? Okay, why do the drivers get flicked up? That's not how momentum works. Although, those shotguns, the idea of them stopping bullets is actually, stopping missiles and incoming objects, like saw earlier with the mortar. That's actually pretty realistic. The idea of using bullets, even machine guns or chain guns, like you can see here, to stop even massive incoming missiles, is already in the use in the military. And the idea of using shotguns is probably very good because it will give you a better spread with the bullet. So, although how these cars don't even have a single scratch on them after missiles, bullets, and smashing through, giant pieces of ice, I have no idea. There is no way. Even a tank would probably be showing dents by now. Again, these cars have got very, very good tyres if they can go over ice that is covered in meltwater. Okay, why would you put a ram like this on a car? Did they actually expect a scenario like this? And you're still crashing the car into something. It would destroy the car that you're driving. This is not a practical device. If you're going to do something, bullets, rockets, that's how you do it. Or explosives. Maybe even the caltrops from earlier. They're alright, but rams, lasers, camouflage, no. Managed to smash through this wall. It's still not dented. No cracks even in the windscreen. And then all of a sudden, his little ring somehow smashes glass that a minigun, rockets and grenades didn't do earlier. You also don't have a windshield now and you've just smashed through a wall. Yes, so no chunks of ice also went through to injure either of the participants. Oh well, there we go. Of course James Bond saves the girl, but I think this is one of the least realistic scenes in a Bond movie, and I'm comparing that with Moonraker. Alright, for our final car, we're going to be looking at a Roger Moore movie, The Spy Who Loved Me. Now, in terms of going a little crazy, I think the Roger Moore ones take the cake overall for James Bond. I've already mentioned Moonraker, although this is a pretty cool but a fairly weird car. But anyway, let's have a look at the scene. This is the main reason I wanted to include this car. This next bit.
Can you swim?
Okay. This is fairly ridiculous, but not for the reasons you might expect. For this movie, they actually made a submarine car called Wet Nelly. Yes, I know. Great name. However, the submarine car Wet Nelly was known as a wet submarine, so that the crew inside still had to use scuba gear. Clearly, they're not using scuba gear. So, it's very difficult to make a dual-purpose vehicle. I covered submarine planes in another one of my clips, and I mentioned a couple of the problems there. Now, let's just have a look at this bit again. So, he fires a rocket from the car. This is clearly a surface-to-air missile. However, I want to know where it's coming from. It looks like it's coming out of the boot. Does your boot happen to have surface-to-air missiles? There's a reason submarines have periscopes that sit outside of the water or stick up above the water, because you need to see what's going on. The water will distort your image and your aiming. So aiming like this is also not very conducive to accuracy. However, the moving submarine, these scenes are real. They built this car and they operated it underwater. So having a submersible that looks like a car, pretty straightforward. However, keeping it completely waterproof, completely different question. Last thing to note here is also the propulsion mechanism. So submarines can only operate diesel engines, or, well, in this case, probably a petrol engine, when they're on the surface, for a very, very good reason. You need oxygen and somewhere you can dump all the fumes from the diesel engine. Diesel engines, petrol engines take a lot of oxygen, which is why cars don't tend to work very well underwater in the first place, even if they don't leak. So it needs an electrical engine. However, in the 1970s, that was probably not going to be very easy to do. I mean, hybrid cars hadn't come around yet, so I'm curious as to where all their power is coming from. So this car might be able to operate. The actual submarine clearly did operate, but the time it'd be able to spend underwater is very limited. Still pretty cool. I wish I had a car like that. Although in typical Roger Moore style, of course, it has to drive out onto a beach and surprise everybody there. However, it is at least slightly better than when James Bond drives a gondola through Venice. And no, I don't mean like just steering it through the water. I mean actually driving it across Venice. If you enjoy these React videos from a scientific perspective, well, please let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to tell me what you want to see next. If you have a movie in mind or a particular theme that you want me to deconstruct, more than happy to. However, if it was me and I was choosing a vehicle that had to drive around and shoot at other fairly heavily armored personnel, then I think I know exactly what I would choose to use. And on that note, I'm almost a doctor, and until next time, be like a proton. Stay positive.
Fire the